Hope supplies the stamina that open societies need to endure a conflict without front lines or clear end dates. Victory, then, is not only about stronger firewalls or bigger budgets. It also rests on people who believe truth matters, law must be fair, neighbors deserve care, and history has meaning. Those beliefs are not extras. They are battlefield assets rooted in the Old and New Testaments. Talk about spiritual warfare. Nobody knows the final outcome in the fog of war, but here's a rule of thumb for long-term survival by a longtime strategist of war and peace named Matthew. Seek first his kingdom, his righteousness. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. This is Ven for WBN 324.
And while I've got the soundbite up, one more time on Madeleine Albright saying killing 500,000 children is okay.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Sunday Long Live Radio, live every Sunday of the year, 6 a.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. UK and 8 p.m. New South Wales for 4 hours with different hosts joining us, called Sunday Long Live. If you want to know any more about it, just type in linktree.com/WBN324. We've got Simon Roche with us, maybe on location, but I'm not sure where, so we're going to check in with Simon and see what's on his mind today. Hey Simon, how are you doing? And what's on your mind today?
I'm doing well, thank you very much for asking, Ria. What's on my mind? There's a lot going on in the world. I don't know where to start, but you might be interested to hear some more about Russia. I don't know. I haven't spoken to you for a month.
No, of course, we couldn't get you on last week, could we? So you're still in. Give us an update. So last time we heard from you on this show was a month ago, because you couldn't get in last time. Give us an update. Walk us through the last month, if you would, Simon, if that's okay.
Yes, certainly. Well, Russia has been a revelation. I attended a forum the other day, and Elon Musk's father was there. I'm not a fan at all, but the anecdote is telling. He was in a panel discussion, and he began his little spiel by saying, my sons didn't want my daughter to come to Russia with me, and there is general propaganda about Russia being whatever. And he said, every moment since I've stepped off the plane, I've realized that every single word in the West is just a complete lie. Russia is the diametric opposite to everything that's said about it. And that's what I can tell you after going on for 6 weeks here, Ria. It is a very interesting place. It's clean. It's spotlessly clean. There's no litter. There are no potholes for the most part. I mean, there's some exceptions, but the roads are good. The water is clean. The electricity works. The prices are low. A decent stay in Russia for a week should see you getting change from $500. What can I tell you? It's very orderly, and people are extremely helpful, overly helpful. You find yourself accepting help in the spirit of graciousness that you don't actually want, because people are just so willing. They're not effusive about it. It's not like some pantomime. It's just the most natural thing in the world. You pick up after a while that it's just their first instinct. And maybe it's a Russian thing, going back through centuries of communism, and prior to that, serfdom and peasantry and what have you. The circumstances of the ordinary people have perhaps led to them being acutely helpful of the people around him. If I've got sugar and you don't, I'm going to share it. It's going to be the first thing that I do without fuss or fanfare. So I have very, very many good things to say about Russia and very, very few negative things. I was in Moscow for just about 3 weeks, and then I went to Arkhangelsk in the far north. Arkhangelsk means archangel. Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, and Uriel, the 4 archangels. On the White Sea. I spent just over a week there. I think it was 9 days, if I'm not mistaken. And that was very pleasant. Very, very pleasant. A little bit decrepit compared to Moscow, but not terrible at all. Russia's provincial cities, and I've been to Arkhangelsk and Severodvinsk, where they make the submarines, or where the submarine base is. As 2 examples of provincial cities, and I rode through a few on the overnight train to get to Arkhangelsk from Moscow, are decrepit to whatever extent they are decrepit, and they're not terribly decrepit, but decrepit in an optimistic way. You don't get the feeling of malaise that you do in, for instance, Baltimore, Chicago, and Detroit in the USA, and others, but particularly those as cities with which I'm familiar, where when you're there, you feel as if it's going in one direction. In Arkhangelsk and Severodvinsk, and in the little towns where I only saw the railway station and what was adjacent to the railway station on the way up, you got more the feeling of this place is decrepit, but it's moving in the opposite direction to decrepitude. There are small signs of little optimisms everywhere that you look.
Such as?
And of course, you get the feeling that although the railway station, for instance, is Soviet, that the ATM machines in the railway station are not going to be the last, and that the cafeteria is booming and they're liable to license a second concession for a cafeteria, and that the 2 cigarette litter bins are soon going to become 4. You just get the feeling that this is not a prospect for despair, wherever you go. So, as I say, I was in Arkhangelsk, and it's a modest city by Moscow standards, where everything is spotlessly clean and magnificent, and they wash the roads, literally wash the roads and the sidewalk separately. Road washing is one endeavor, sidewalk washing is another endeavor, twice a day, every street in Moscow. It's really quite special. It's a fantastic place. So Arkhangelsk, not in that league, but even there, people absolutely marvelously helpful, and it looks like it's moving in a positive direction. You just get that feeling. You see new places cropping up. Whereas in Baltimore, Detroit, and Chicago, certainly those portions that I saw, everything looked decrepit. In other words, you didn't see, let's say, a row of storefronts, 10 storefronts, 5 of them unoccupied, and 4 of them occupied by shops whose facades don't look good. So it looks like everything is moving in a bad direction, and there's lots of litter, for instance. In a place like Arkhangelsk or Severodvinsk, you would see in a row of 10 storefronts, guaranteed 8 of them will be occupied, if not all 10, and 2 or 3 of them will be brand spanking new shops. if that helps to create a better idea in people's minds of why it is that I say that not everywhere in Russia is Moscow and St. Petersburg, but everywhere in Russia, no matter how Soviet or decrepit it may be, gives you the feeling that it's on the up. No matter how low, it's like a patient in bed who was very, very, very ill, and you go to visit him after not having seen him for 3 days, and he's still bedridden, but there's a flush in his cheeks. You know, the guy's got one foot in the grave, but he's got a flush on his cheeks, and you think, that's, you know, he's moving. That's nice to see. He's moving in the right direction, although he's a long way from well, if that makes sense, Ria.
I got you. And did you meet many, or so far, have you met anybody you can sit down and have a chat with in English?
Ria, very few people in Russia speak English. Very, very few. However, I've gotten, to say this in the nicest possible way, as charmingly as the words can mean it, mixed up with a bunch called the Brotherhood of Academists, and they are conservative Christian students studying at the best universities in Russia, studying very, very, very demanding subjects, no gender studies or sociology or psychology or any of that nonsense, studying the most demanding degrees imaginable, so super duper selected best brains in Russia chappies, and they, not for the most part, some of them speak English, and I've had terrific chats with them, and I've got a host called Dmitry Balkovsky, who has a YouTube channel called Russia Move, who offers a service to foreigners coming out here, because there are some difficulties. For instance, you're not allowed to rent a car. And this is because of the special military operation and the Tajikis and Kazakhs and all of these people who've been assisting the Ukrainians and NATO to perpetrate terrorist acts on Russian soil. As a foreigner, you may also not get you can get a SIM card when you arrive at the airport. You may remove the SIM card, your phone SIM card, replace it with another SIM card that functions just for 14 days. In my case, it functioned for 12 days and 12 hours, and then it was cut off. And you have 12 gigabytes of data to use. And once that is lost, in other words, if you use up your 12 gigabytes, I didn't, although I was cut off early, you may not recharge it. So for the rest of your stay, what you have to do from day one is go to what they call the Gososlugi, which is like a general state services place for anything under the sun, anything resembling a municipal or an oblast. You know, their equivalent of provinces is oblasts, or federal service. You have done at the Gososlugi. It's really quite efficient. It's quite a marvelously efficient entity, but by its nature, the process is difficult. So it took me 3 days to go to the Gososlugi and then to go to the bank to open a compulsory bank account for the purpose. I'm coming to the point in a minute. And then to go to the document translator, and then to go to the document verification people, and then back to the bank, and then back to the Gososlugi, and then back to the bank, and then to the Gososlugi again, to eventually be allowed to buy a Russian phone with a Russian SIM card, on which I'm speaking to you now. So it's all good, but that process can be blooming difficult if you don't speak Russian, and Russian is a notoriously difficult language. And this chap, Dmitry Balkovsky, who has been playing host to me and whose services are well worth it, he assists people to jump through all of those hoops when they arrive in Russia for a holiday or a longer stay. So he'll accompany you, hold your hand for 2 or 3 days, costs a few $100 worth every cent. And Dmitry speaks impeccable English, having lived in the USA for 5 years and New Zealand for 3 years. So yes, to answer your question, for the most part, Russians do not speak English, but there are one or two exceptions, and I've had tremendous conversations with them, Ria.
Okay, we've got to hit those conversations if that's okay. So, okay, got you so far. If you're just tuning in, you listen to Simon Roche from Suidlanders, South Africa, on tour in Russia under invite from someone in Russia. So when you've been able to speak English and, you know, this, that and the other, so you can actually have a sort of conversation, have you gone there on the geopolitical scene, or is it local Russian stuff, or touched on both national and international? Give us a bit of an insight into your anecdotal experiences yourself in that context, if you would, Simon.
Well, I've had a couple of meetings with senior government people very close to the Kremlin. I haven't had tea with Uncle VV Putin himself, but it is meaningful that I've held a couple of meetings at locations proximate to the Kremlin. That means that they're very, very powerful people, and I'm not people. And when I speak to these super genius youngsters who belong to the Brotherhood of Academists, studying 10 subjects simultaneously, in which they have to complete each subject as if it was a degree. Otherwise, they don't get their degree. In other words, they're really, really, really clever guys working blooming hard to be the next generation of geniuses in Russia, whether it be in physics or nanotechnology or international relations, geosciences, all of these things that they study. And when I speak to ordinary people, I get the same feeling. To answer your question, yes. When the subject of geopolitics comes up, yes, the subject of geopolitics does come up, and when it does come up, there's a kind of a combination of stoicism and I don't want to say complacency, but their attitude is roughly echoes, all of them, the attitude of Medinsky, the negotiator in the Istanbul negotiations with Ukraine of 2 weeks ago, in which he stood up and he said to the Ukrainians when they were intransigent, look, now we're demanding the 4 oblasts that are 100% Russian, and where 2 of them have already voted to become part of Russia. Next time it'll be 8. And he also said, guys, do you understand that we fought Sweden for 21 years when Sweden was the greatest power in Europe? We can do this forever. And that's how these very high up people who have the privileges of offices whose windows open onto the walls of the Kremlin, or onto, views of the walls of the Kremlin, to these genius youngsters, to ordinary people, it's, whatever. We're going about our lives. We're not too concerned about the war in the Donbass. It's a great pity. We wish it had never happened, but we're going to win. So, we just take it one day.
Oh, it's cutting out.
At a time.
Okay, let me just cover a bit of air while you get the signal back. Simon, let's just give us a second. Let things catch up your end. There's a bit of a signal loss here. I think Simon's on a phone, and we're doing the best we can with staying in contact with him. So we've got the vibe right. So some smarty pants people that know their onions are saying, like, yeah, this is kind of the vibe, or inferring, this happens. It's not rocked our world. And we're kind of in it for the long run, but we're getting on with the life regardless, even though it's going on, but it is a shame. So you got that vibe going on. Have you spoke to people that maybe, has it come up in circles where people are less politically versed, let's say, less politically engaged? In fact, there's a question. Have you met anybody that speaks English that's not politically engaged, Simon?
I have met many people who speak English who are not politically engaged, although they do have an opinion. Some are not politically engaged, for sure, Ria.
And what's on the menu with them? Did it come up? Did you steer it there? Did they steer it there because you're from South Africa, or did they speak to or are you leading the conversation about South Africa or something like that?
Well, I try to be cautious, and we don't discuss South Africa very much. I discussed South Africa at one very high-level meeting, and yeah, it was made clear to me that they are not mentally retarded and that they are very well aware of what is cooking in South Africa, and they find it very regrettable. They do not have a high opinion of the African National Congress at all, in spite of the fact that they are married to them through BRICS, which of course gives a lot of cause for speculations to what is the nature of the marriage and why was it undertaken in the first place. But that's a subject for another day. I don't go down the South Africa road, but I'm also tactful about addressing the Russia question. You know, if people if they seem uncomfortable, no problem. Let me illustrate. I caught a train from Moscow to Arkhangelsk, as I've already told you.
Can you give people, sorry to interrupt you, when you say a place name, like a town, a city or whatever, can you use the reference as Moscow? So example, I travelled 300 miles northwest too, so people get an idea roughly where you are in using Moscow as a reference.
Yeah, so I travelled 1,200 kilometers roughly due north to the White Sea, to the Arctic Circle, from Moscow to the coast, obviously on the White Sea, Arkhangelsk. It means Archangel, and I caught a train. And when I got on the train, or shortly after I got on the train, I wrote in Google Translate for the conductress. I am a YouTube content maker. I was invited to Russia by Mr. X, so she would know precisely who I was talking about. And I would like to do some work. May I go and sit in the restaurant compartment? I mean, I could have just walked down the passage.
Okay, guys, we lost you there, Simon.
Myself, but it seemed like the right way to
Simon, we lost you there.
handle the moat. Took me to the restaurant compartment.
Right, okay, we had a bit of a big gap there, my darling. If we could get near a window or something, maybe just the drops are getting a bit worse. So if you could get near a window, or we'll try and locate the best signal for you for wherever you are. But so far, lovely, is why we get Simon gets himself in position. He's travelled 1,200 Ks, so 800, 900 miles north of Moscow to another city. Simon, have we got you back? Simon, you're muted. There you go.
I hope Ria, am I back?
Yeah, got you.
Okay, I'm walking to a different location. So the story was that I jumped on the train and I wrote in Google Translate for the conductress who I am, what I'm doing in Russia, and I'd like to do work. And she took me to the restaurant compartment, and I sat there for a couple of hours, and then I jumped off at one of the stops, and I walked up the station platform to my original compartment. And as I walked past her, she was scowling, and I thought, goodness me, what on earth have I done? You know, I've just been working, minding my own business in the restaurant compartment. Anyway, next morning I wake up before the rest of the compartment, as I always wake up early, and I carried on with work. This is an open compartment, so little booths without doors, sleeping 4 times about 20 of them. And after about an hour and a half, I was filming out the window, and a conductress came to me, and she let rip in Russian. So I just said, sorry, and I packed up my stuff. I mean, I wasn't doing anything to be sorry for. I didn't think I was, but I just, on principle, said sorry. Clearly, I'm bad. I just don't know how yet. About an hour and a half after that, along comes a third conductress. She walks up, and she walks down, the length of the compartment, and I just got the feeling it was to do with me. And she returns a little while later with a man in a kind of a smart uniform, and they walk up and they walk down. I thought, oh, this is to do with me. Next thing, she comes up to me and she starts prattling in Russian. And by this time, I'd met a guy who speaks English. And he said, well, you've got to, confirm your documents. So I pulled out my passport and what have you. Then this guy comes in his uniform and he says, Mr. Simon John, come with me, please. So I trundled after him, and he said to me something that I thought I could make out that the first or the second conductress that had yelled at me early in the morning had said, namely, what you're doing is wrong, videoing from the train is unacceptable, and the police will be waiting for you at Arkhangelsk. Now, you can imagine if you were local Mr. Plod Ria, and somebody rang you up and said, in your village where you live, there's a Russian guy, he's been walking around filming things, and we think it should be looked into. You're not going to do a thing. You're going to ring MI5 or whoever, Scotland Yard, and say the security branch maybe, and say, look, clearly, if anybody's going to address this subject at all, it's not going to be me. Number one, it involves a foreigner. Number one, it doesn't involve littering or whatever, common crimes. It involves perhaps something far more sinister at a state level. So naturally, I sat there when I finished with this guy thinking, right, that's it. I'm going to be picked up by the KGB. Obviously, they've got successors with new names, but people are not familiar with them. So that is to say, the old Soviet security services now have new names, but most people don't know them. So I'm just going to stick with the stereotypical name in the West, the KGB. Obviously, Mr. Plod is not going to come, because it involves a foreigner and because it involves, filming out of a state vehicle, the big state, the broad state, what's out there. Apparently filming nuclear secrets or who knows whatever it is. So I nipped straws. Ria, I nipped straws like I have never for 2.5 hours. And this guy, this English speaker who was sort of helping me, said to me, are you afraid? I said, I'm absolutely terrified. He said, well, keep it up because you're doing a good job of not looking terrified. You look well composed. I said, I am not. I'm flipping dreading this. I've been guaranteed that I'm about to be arrested. And I'm not going to be arrested by Mr. Plod. I'm going to be arrested by flipping, guys who are going to take me to the Lubyanka. Anyway, so that was a most dreadful experience, but all's well that ends well. We get to the blasted train station in Arkhangelsk, jump off, and there's nobody to arrest me. So I thought, heavens above, if I leave now and these guys arrive 3 minutes too late because the train was a bit early or because the police car wouldn't start or whatever the case may be, or they were changing shifts or something, and they have to kind of pursue me, and it becomes aggravated. Their boss is yelling at them, did you get him at the train station? No, he wasn't here. And they're searching every hotel. It's going to intensify the matter. So the best thing that I can do is stand right here like a schoolboy with my feet together and my hands at my sides and just wait for the big moment. So I stood there for about 20 minutes on that platform, looking, I'm sure, like an absolute idiot, waiting to be arrested by the KGB, and nothing happened. Eventually I thought, well, how long am I supposed to wait? Half an hour, an hour, 2 hours? No, I'm going to the hotel. So I caught a bus to the hotel, and spent that night wondering if I should be expecting a knock on the door, trying not to think about it. Woke up the next morning and nothing had happened. And by then I realized I was in the clear. But I told the story with this very same Raman guy who'd accompanied me and helped me with English, translating the accusations and what have you. With him and his wife and a taxi driver about 5 days later on the way to an open-air museum, a magnificent place called Mali Kareli, which means Little Karelia. It's a museum of wood construction. It's really, really impressive. One of the best museums I've ever been to. And on the way there, I was telling, or on the way back, I forget now. And the taxi driver was in stitches of laughter. Amerikanski spion! Amerikanski spion! So that was my dramatic moment, my one kind of negative to the trip. For the rest, it's been marvelous. Russia is absolutely marvelous, and it's dirt cheap, and everybody should visit Ria.
I got you done. That was a brilliant story. You should have stole one of their big black Mercedes cars and done away, stereotyping and everything. Okay, so what else have we got? So how long have you been out there? What, 6 weeks-ish, something like that? And the original remit was 6 weeks, wasn't it? So bring us up to date. So you was up north, had a bit of a run-in on the train, got scared to death. Everything turned out to be okay. So you're at the north. Then from there, what happened after that? Or are you still there?
No, I returned to Moscow in anticipation of traveling to the Donbass. I held a meeting with a very, very, very senior politician, and he seems to think that going to the Donbass is a good idea. I told him why I wanted to go. I said that I wanted to film. I said, that there is this continuing narrative in the West, which was recently reiterated by very senior people like Mark Rutte. He didn't use these words, but he was talking about the same idea, namely that Russia is being absolutely crushed by the sanctions. And Ursula von der Leyen has on 2 occasions said that the Russian state is plundering ordinary people's microwave ovens and washing machines for computer chips, semiconductors, so that they can make missiles and repair their fighter planes. And let me tell you, Ria, nothing in the world could be further from the truth. I've seen more, if we talk about just Mercedes or Daimler-Benz, right?
Oh,
I've seen more Maybach.
It's always a black Mercedes.
Yeah. I've seen more AMGs, 63s, Mercedes Blacks, Mercedes Blues, Geländewagens, Maybachs, and S-Series.
They're the
Mercedes.
oligarchs.
No, Ria, that's not true. I've seen more of those motor cars than I have put together the rest of my life in New York, Washington, D.C., Frankfurt, Hamburg, Berlin. You name all the places that I've visited, put together. If those are all of the oligarchs, then there are like 8 million of them. There are enough motor cars here to power every. If what that woman was saying is conceptually true, that the semiconductors used in washing machines are the same sort that are used in hypersonic missiles, then they could just as well, there would be no shortage. There could never be a shortage. They would just have to take them from the Mercedes-Benz's tire pressure monitoring system. My point being that there is this everything in Western media in English is absolutely false. So I said to this bigwig, I want to go down and film because Lindsey Graham said last week, that's now 2 weeks ago, that Russia is not winning. Just take a look at the map. The front lines have hardly moved. I said, I know that that's not true. I want to go and stand in the places where the front lines were 18 months ago and show people that as far as you can see to the horizon, the front line has moved and moved again. And it's just everything is a fiction. And I said, I'd like to do this for for the sake of the truth. I said, I'm not a Russia fanboy. I'm a fan of the truth. I'm a fan of low rates of rape. It's something that I abhor. Murder, never been a great fan. Chaos, not my cup of tea. And so the list goes on. And because I can leave, I'll give you an example. I went to the Kaleidoscope Mall. I went with another man. As you know, men don't go to the toilet together. It so happened that we misunderstood one another, and so we ended up leaving our bags on the table of the food court, both of us at the same time, instead of one staying to keep an eye. And we both ended up, a couple of paces apart from one another at the urinals. On the way back, I said to him, we shouldn't have left our bags like that. And he said to me, yeah, I've got $60,000 in mine. And on that morning, we'd spent the whole morning collecting cash. He's quite a serious businessman. It's clean business, but he was picking up his income here and there. And he had $60,000 in his bag.
Like you do.
Yeah, exactly. I had $5,000 and my phones, my passport, wallet, identity documents, special papers, my Gosuslugi stuff, everything. But that's what you do in Russia. It's just a civilized place. So I said to this guy, I want the West to see, because the only person really reporting from there is Patrick Lancaster, and he's not really strong in voice and image. He's stronger in the written field. I'd like to make videos. So this guy said, no problem. We'll get you sorted out. You're off to the Donbass, off to the front lines. I'll make sure that everything's set up. So that's my long-winded way of answering your question, Ria. My next stop is the war zone, the Donbass. Simon Roche reporting live.
What happened then?
Oh, our bags were still there. We finished our food, whatever it was, and I think we ate Rostiks, which is the local, they bought up all of these brands that left Russia. And 3 weeks ago, Vladimir Putin had some brands in the USA expressed a desire to return to Russia. And some businessmen called a meeting with Uncle Vladimir, and Uncle Vladimir said, look, don't panic. We're not going to let them back in just like that. They're going to have to bow and scrape and jump through some hoops before we even consider them coming back in. But all of these guys who snapped up these international brands and who, changed them, tweaked them slightly, are laughing all the way to the bank. The Rostiks, formerly KFC, is delicious. We finished our Rostiks and we left. Our stuff was perfectly safe. He wasn't saying panic-stricken, oh, I left the $60,000 lying on the table. He said it in a laconic way. Yeah, especially me, I left $60,000 in that bag. But he was quite happy to do it. Misunderstanding about whose turn it is to go to the toilet. Both end up going at the same time. Who cares? It's $60,000, but this is Russia. Nobody's going to steal it. It's out of the question.
So did you know this guy then a bit, or did you just met him?
Yeah. No, I'd known him for a few days. His name is Dmitry Bolkovsky. He's kind of my host. He renders a service.
Oh,
he has
right,
a YouTube
got you.
channel called Russia Move. And he renders a service to foreigners coming in to make it a little bit easier for them, because the language is, make no mistake, damn difficult, and which you can circumvent. You can vault that hurdle with Google Translate. It's not an insurmountable hurdle, the language, at all, by any means, but it does make it awkward. And so this guy renders a service, a few $100 worth every cent, to hold your hand for a few days, take you to the right places, show you everything, make sure that you're comfortable about where you're staying, how much you're paying, what services you get, what you don't get, take you to the Gosuslugi to get a Russian phone, take you to the Document Translation Bureau, to the Justice of the Peace to have the documents certified, to the bank 2 or 3 times to perform 2 or 3 different aspects of the process. And then you're kind of set. So Dmitry and I just happened to be at the Kaleidoscope. He was showing me, here you can buy a telephone, here's a food court, there's a bank over there, blah, 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 blah. And we were having lunch, and he'd been collecting money around, around the show. He'd made about 10 stops on the way, 6 or 7 stops perhaps. and he had over $60,000. It was more than $60,000 in his bag, old Dimitri. He doesn't do too badly for himself. He has a few businesses, bullion trading, all sorts of things. He lives in, this is quite interesting. He invited me to his place for a barbecue. He has visited South Africa, as he has visited the USA and the UK and New Zealand and all sorts of places. And he said, I know you South Africans and meat. You live on this stuff. I said, yeah, I only eat meat. I eat meat 5 times a day. I buy a sheep once every 5 weeks for about $3.75 a pound.
Like you do.
And yeah, and I get it chopped up and I barbecue it, and that's all I eat. Breakfast, tea, lunch, high tea, supper. And so, yeah, as it happens, I'm flipping. I haven't had meat on the plane. Haven't had meat for 2 days now. Just those ridiculous little plane dinners. And so he said, okay, we've organized the braai for you, a barbecue. Go to his house. It's in this beautiful big, what we would call an estate in South Africa. Maybe 40 or 100, or for that matter, 500 houses with a great big wall around the entire perimeter and a few gates to enter, very tightly controlled, very safe inside, not too much murder, rape, and robbery. So I said to him, oh, this is a nice compound / estate, call it whatever you like. And he said, yeah, it's the American embassies. I said, what? He said, yeah, when they were forced to leave, these houses stood empty. So he said, we snapped them up. And he lives in this magnificent house that was previously the house of some quasi-potentate of the American embassy in Russia. Oh, as a little side note, Ria.
I've got you, darling. Yeah, I'm glad you cleared that up, because I thought like you'd gone into a Rusky KFC, sat down, guy goes, got 60k USD in my bag. Do you want to go in the loos? You walk in and George Michael is playing. Do you know what I mean? So I'm glad you cleared that up. When are you getting to the front line then?
I'm not sure, Ria. I will serve the documents on tomorrow, Monday, except there's one complication. I've just picked up a fantastic interview. I won't break the seal on it just yet, but it may be that the technical arrangements for that interview take up most of tomorrow, in which case I'll submit the documents on Tuesday, and hopefully within 48 hours or so I'll receive official approval, and I'll be down there by latest Friday, Ria.
Got you. Okay, so we're coming in for closing out. We've still got a little while yet. We've got about 7 minutes. With that, so you're in Russia. Everything's going well. The KGB. And on that note, that story you told about being on the train and like pooing yourself and everything nearly. Has anybody seen the PooTube channel Sabbatical? Well, he was like Simon. He was out filming and they got him. And he videoed it and everything. It's on PooTube and the channel is called Sabbatical. Have a look at that one. So like you think, oh, it never happened, but it happened to him, and it really put him off of Russia when they got hold of him. So just putting it out there, it does happen. Do you know what I mean? It's not just a fictional story. So the front line's calling you, Simon. With that all going well, fingers crossed, and you don't get shot up and you get a bulletproof jacket and all that. Are you ever going to go back to South Africa, or are you going to be a Russian?
Ria, if I was 1 year younger than when my first child was conceived and I came to Russia, and let's say I had foresight of how severely South Africa would decline. Somebody was just greeting me, as Russian people do. They're delightful people. They don't wander around with idiotic smiles on their faces, and they don't have that false politeness that is so prevalent in the West.
You would so stay there if you could.
I would, Ria. I would, in a heartbeat. You know, the people are sincere and helpful and kind. And this place is burgeoning like nobody's business. I don't know if you saw, Ria, but 2 weeks ago I mentioned this to one of my sons this afternoon, and he said, yeah, Dad, I read the article. There was an article saying, entitled, is Russia's economy now the third largest in the world? And that comes on the heels of the incredible revelation by the World Bank in February of last year that Russia had leapfrogged from like the 9th or the 12th or something largest economy in the span of a number of years to the 4th largest, identifiably. But they said Russia's economy is, I think, 6-point-something trillion large, GDP. However, we know that there are inner workings which we can't see, therefore we can't quantify them, therefore they do not form any part of this report. However, we estimate that they are another 40 to 60% of what we are capable of identifying in the absence of the SWIFT and the MasterCard and the Visa architecture, et cetera, that allows the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of International Settlements, et cetera, to monitor all of the economies of the whole world very reliably, very precisely and accurately, except for Russia. So the Russian economy, I then calculated what that meant if it was 60%, 6 million times 3, and it came to just about $9 trillion potentially last February. That is to say, February 2024, I beg your pardon. And the Zero Hedge is now saying that it might be the world's third largest economy. There's economic opportunity falling out of the trees and lying on the floor and rotting like in an apple orchard that is unattended here in Russia. It really is quite incredible. The women are far more beautiful than this ridiculous stereotype that Russia has the world's most beautiful women. That's a pathetic shadow of honest English adjudication of how gorgeous they really are. The money to be made here is great, and it's civilized and decent and respectable and orderly. Why wouldn't I stay here? Yeah, absolutely. No two ways about it.
Because you've got to learn to speak Russian.
Yeah, but I would master it. They claim, they tell me that I've done very well in the time that I've been here, that relatively speaking, I've done far better than most foreigners do in 5.5 weeks, although it doesn't feel like that to me. But I'd set my heart to it, and I'd master it. No two ways about it. Why not?
I know everything's easier if you really want it, right? Everything. If you want something like bad, you'll do it. I totally get that. Right, we're coming into close out. Okay, so you're going to be on in 2 weeks, and you're due on the front line. Hopefully all that works out okay. I don't know what your plan is after. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. What else was I going to say? It's, you know, like you've just mentioned, third biggest economy is doing really well and you're buzzed on it, and I love you for it and everything. Is like those, like Alistair McLeod says they've got 14% GDP, debt to GDP, right? And then I just straight away think, yeah, but what does that mean for regular folk in any country, anywhere? Any country, anywhere, round someone's kitchen table, are they doing all right? Do you know what I mean? You get all these fancy schmancy people in fancy suits and that saying, oh yeah, this, that and the other. But what does it mean for real people around the kitchen table? That's what I want to know. And not so much the city dwellers, the city slickers. We're coming up on time. We've got 2 minutes. Not the city slickers. I mean, rural folk. Are things going okay for them in any country? That's when, to me, an economy is doing all right. 2 minutes to close out, Simon.
Famously, last year, the American Embassy, or an entity in the American Embassy, I want to say the Hoover Institute, although I'm sure I'm very wrong in pointing my finger at the Hoover Institute, did a survey of Russians in anticipation of the presidential elections of late last year. And they released the results the day before the elections, and they forecast that the following day, Vladimir Putin would receive 88% of the vote. In the event, he got 87% of the vote. A couple of years ago, famously, Vladimir Putin held like an open conversation with people from the regions. And one woman from a very remote region stood up and said, "You've given us a lot of money, and I just want to tell you we've used it very well, so we would like some more, please." when you go to the provincial regions or pass through them, as I have done, you do see that they are not as opulent as Moscow and St. Petersburg, etc., etc. But
30
to
seconds.
ordinary Russians, they are doing splendidly well. Thank you very much. And one of the big concerns in Russia, everywhere you go, is what on earth are we going to do when Uncle Vladimir goes? Because this guy never puts a foot wrong, and we are swimming in comfort compared to 20 years ago. Ria, they're doing very well, ordinary Russians. Thank you for having Suidlanders on your show, Ria. We appreciate it very much.
Stay safe, my darling. There you go, lovelies. There's Simon Roche reporting in from Russia. Some of his anecdotal stories and what's going on. Thoroughly an enjoyable listen. Let me just disconnect him. There he goes. Ubernoz says, why are you talking about Russia? Because he's in Russia. And he's touring Russia, so it's Russia. I know you're coming with the Israeli stuff, and that's like on topic, but like, yeah, he's in Russia, so he's going to talk about Russia, right? What we got there, fascinating story, anecdotal. Obviously, Simon loves it there, and we'll have to see what develops there. And thoroughly exciting. Who would have seen it coming? You know, South African Suidlanders civil defence organisation, like the PR side of it, ends up in Russia doing a tour. I mean, that's absolutely mad, isn't it? Just got it. Did you talk about the war today? Not so much. We did from, this is Ubernouse, we did, but not from current events. It was a bigger picture kind of take on it, really. And the show, if you're new to listening to it even now, it's a 4-hour show every Sunday, and it's completely unscripted. So when the hosts come on, the hosts bring what they bring, and then we just talk about it. It's not on script. Some of it could be current event. In fact, only a little bit, usually I would say, out of the 4 hours is current events. So yeah, that's the way it rolls, right? Whatever the hosts come with, they come with. If it starts getting dark and I start getting a bit edgy, because like it's Sunday and that, it's an easy listening radio show, I'll try and steer it away from it getting too dark, because it's a Sunday, right? People are making their coffee in the morning, or they're chilling out doing a sunsetter at night in Oz. It's not a heavy going thing, right? And so that's the style of the show. It's an easy listen, really. And whatever the hosts bring is kind of okay. I just hope it doesn't get too dark. Right, there you go, lovely. It's Sunday Long Live Radio, live every Sunday of the year in whatever radio network you're listening on. And we already go out on 2 video platforms. If you want to know more, just type in linktree.com/WBN324. And that's what we've got going on here.